Hey friends, it's Lisa Lisser. Welcome to Dishing on Divorce on WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio, Podcast, and TV. You can find us on YouTube, Apple TV, Spotify, and wherever you stream your podcasts. I'm your host, Lisa Lisser, CEO and founder of LZL Coaching, a boutique coaching firm focused on divorce, relationships, and life transitions. I'm also a divorced mom of 3 now grown kids, a recovering lawyer, a current educator and spiritual counselor, and a divorce coach who is committed to transforming the divorce experience for everyone involved. I see divorce coaching as the bridge between the therapist and the lawyer, the guide on the side who answers the questions that keep you up at night and helps you navigate the inevitable challenges and dark spaces that invade your space and lead you astray. I'm also the person on your team who will help you see the light at the other side of the tunnel and keep reminding you that there is another side. You will get there. My guest today is Tovah Kopan, who is also an expert at living that truth and supporting women as they move to the other side and learn to thrive. Welcome, Tovah, my friend, colleague, and inspiration on my own coaching journey.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
So let me share a bit about Tovah before we really get into the fun stuff with today's podcast. So Tovah is a dynamic mother of 3 boys and a passionate advocate for personal growth and community engagement. With 5 years of experience navigating life after divorce, she hopes to be a support and inspiration for others. And I can share from experience that she truly is. As the host and coach at the Go Boldly initiative, she has dedicated herself to fostering self-realization and guiding others through transformational journeys. Over a decade, she has counseled with legal professionals to elevate their business strategies and help them achieve their goals. She thrives on building strong relationships, telling inspiring stories, and creating a supportive community of like-minded individuals. So Tovah, welcome to our show.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Me too. I mean, especially because you and I met through a local in-person networking group. Mm-hmm. And I was really at the very, very beginning of my coaching journey. It was a life transition for me. And I want to share with the audience that Tovah and I had a huddle, like a business huddle, and we shared coffee and learned a little bit about each other. Now, it could have felt competitive, like I was invading her lane. I mean, we were both coaches, and in some networking groups, you can't have 2 professionals that are doing the same thing. And my last coffee in a different networking group turned out that way. And the person said, you can't be in this networking group because we're both coaches. So I was a little tentative, but that was not Tovah. It was the opposite. And we learned that we shared more in common than we expected. And that led to more coffees and more connections. And a few months later, Tovah invited me to be a guest on her podcast. And that was amazing for a lot of reasons. And her podcast is We Go Boldly. And that's really what this is all about. Networking turned into friendship. And that is the power of moving into life after major life challenges like divorce, like changing jobs, like health challenges, like everything. So the first thing I want to do before we launch is thank you, Tovah, for being open to a new relationship and open to being my friend. So I offer gratitude.
I appreciate that. And, you know, I appreciate that feeling sometimes of feeling competitive. And I don't know. Every once in a while, I have to remind myself that there's space for everybody. And fortunately, that feeling happens like less and less. But I do think it's something that it's okay to have to remind yourself of that. Like, oh, that's right. And I don't know that I felt that with you. I'm just thinking of other experiences where it's like, oh, that's right. There's space for everybody. And years ago, when I just started reading personal development books, and I read, I think, Eat That Frog or something like that. You've not heard this book?
No, I have not.
So it's a good one, and it's short. And the whole point is, you often have this like long to-do list. I'm boiling it down in a not good way, but you have this long to-do list, and oftentimes we do like the little things on the to-do list because we're avoiding the big thing. And the whole point is to like eat the frog, eat that, do the big thing. And it talks about breaking things down into smaller pieces, all this great stuff. And then years later, I read a similar book, but from a different perspective, but same concept of figuring out the big things and breaking things down into little pieces. And I don't know who said it. Maybe it was on somebody's podcast, but they made the point, I don't think comparing those books, that's just the comparison that I thought of, that 2 people, 10 people can be saying the exact same thing, but the people hearing it need to hear it from a certain messenger, right? And they need to hear it from the certain person. So your focus is on divorce specifically, and beyond that, other transitions. But you and I would not necessarily speak to the same people, right? And the people who need to hear what we're saying, even if we're saying the exact same thing, are not going to hear the message from me like they might hear it from you, or from you like they might hear it from me. And I think that's often why, like, it's important to remember there's always space for another personal development book. There's always space for another podcast, because it's not so much necessarily what we're saying, but who we are that are saying it.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm gonna bring that to our title, The Joy of Unlearning with Tovah, because in our heads, we may think, I don't want to try that because there's already so much on that topic, or there's already so many people doing that thing. Why would anyone want to look to me? Why would anyone need what I offer? But what you just shared is, I offer it, but in a different way. And if it's coming through my voice, it sounds different and it looks different. And someone is going to hear it differently, and a different person is going to hear it.
Yeah.
So let me unlearn this obstacle, right?
I think also, like, I've learned not to judge myself if I do feel like that first, like, competitive, right? So I might see somebody who has a podcast and comes out with a book, and, I think the comparison instinct is so strong, and I might immediately feel like, wow, like that's, feel competitive and be like, how did they do that? And I haven't done that yet, or why are they having that success and I haven't? And in the past, I think I would have felt guilty and maybe like a bad person, because that was my first instinct, rather than saying, but my second instinct was to immediately celebrate them and to say, hey, congratulations, this is so exciting. Like, I'm so excited for you. And remembering that often that first instinct is something that we have had in us and learned, like talking about unlearning, have learned for decades. And it's the stuff that people told us we had to do. It's this concept, right? Having one woman on a board, and we have our token woman, and seeing how that was. And that's still in our heads, right? Like, that's still, even if that's not what we truly believe, and there's space for women everywhere, that still is like there. And it's okay that, like, that's the very first instinct, because I kept it inside. I'm not acting on it. If I'm concerned about it, I could journal on it. I could meditate on it. But, like, my action is, and in my genuine feeling, the one that comes right behind it, is really excitement for them. And I think often, though, we can feel that, whatever that first response is, and think, well, that's who I really am. And it's like, no, that's who you've been taught for decades by whomever, and you're unlearning that. And you didn't act on that. You didn't shut down that person. You didn't stop being friends and distance yourself because you couldn't handle the competition. You acted differently. So I think that we're so hard on ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, we're definitely hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
For so many reasons. And like, what is the definition of success or failure is something that we've learned.
Right.
So we need to unlearn, or we have the opportunity to unlearn it. You know, just even vocabulary. I am unlearning vocabulary.
Well, and I think, you know, my co-host and my partner, Riley, isn't here today. She's recovering from surgery. And it's funny because I'm used to like her being next to me and doing these things with her. But one thing that she has, you know, we have each brought different things to each other. And she has taught me a lot about boundaries, right? And me thinking, I don't even know that I knew what a boundary was. And I didn't know also that I could still be warm and welcoming. And I love to do acts of service for people. I love to give. I love to give gifts. And I love to volunteer. And I think I thought that there wasn't a place for boundaries, or I didn't even think about it. Right. It took me a very long time to get through the Codependency No More book, which I feel like is a must read for a lot of people going through a divorce. But it took me a long time because I kept having to put it down. But she taught me about how I could set a boundary, and that boundaries are about me. They're not about being mean. They're not about the other person. And then I think I taught her about the word failure and how you can fail. And you should try to fail. Like, you should try new things and be like, oh, that didn't work. Let me try something new. And failing doesn't make you a failure. And I think that even saying that someone is a success, we would assume that there would be no failure, right, in their lives, because you are either a success or a failure, rather than recognizing that everybody's going to have some successes and failures. And everybody's going to fail. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they are a failure, or whatever definition you use of being a success.
Right.
That somebody is going to have both. And often when you read memoirs and you read about in history, it's the people that we look back and consider to be the biggest successes that have had tons of failures in their lives.
Failures, right? Like, I never, or I always remember the Wayne Gretzky quote, right? I miss all the shots I don't take.
Right.
And then there's the Brene Brown quoting Theodore Roosevelt.
Right.
The man in the ring very greatly.
Yeah.
You have to be in it, and you're gonna fail. And we remember our mistakes much more than we remember our successes.
Yeah. And the emotions attached to them are stronger.
Yeah. And that's how we learn.
Yeah.
And
so the Eagles, we are big Philadelphia Eagles fans in our house, and the quarterback has a quote, and I don't know when he said it, but it is win or learn.
Yeah.
Not that you can't learn from your wins, but you often are not reflecting as much on your wins. But that's a quote that we talk about in our family a lot, that, you're either going to win or you're going to learn. Those are
Right. And so when I was like a baby coach, one of my coaches taught me that quote only a little bit differently. It was you don't win or lose, you win and learn. Like it's not even an or, it's an and.
Yeah, which is even better.
Yeah, because there's you have opportunities. Like failing is an opportunity. And it's not easy to fail. It's not easy to make mistakes, and we don't want to admit our mistakes very often. But mistakes are the cracks are where the light gets in.
Yeah.
Right. That's a quote from Cohn, who I now just forgot his first name. It's in all the curricula I write.
It'll come back. It'll come back.
It'll come back. But, it's that's where the beauty is.
Yeah.
You need the cracks, because that's also what makes everything unique.
Yeah.
In Japanese art, there is this process called kintsugi, and they take the broken pieces of porcelain and they glue them back together with gold. So they make the bowls more beautiful after they've been broken by recreating them with gold. And that is even better. Like when we're talking about divorce, right?
Yeah.
Broken families. Well, we're not broken. We're just different, right?
I mean, that was a conversation that I had when I left my marriage. My oldest child was 7 years old. And he already had a very sort of, he is a perfectionist. That is his goal. And he is rigid. And, there's a lot of like, this is how things are supposed to be. And so we had to have some conversations, a lot of conversations. And he didn't have any friends whose parents were divorced. It was interesting because my middle son did have friends whose parents were divorced. And so, he saw kids being picked up from daycare and dropped off. Somebody gets picked up by their mom, then somebody gets picked up by their dad. Or in one case, somebody got picked up by their mom, and then they got picked out by their other mom. Like he had seen it in action, and my older son hadn't. And so he really felt like, well, this is a failure and now we're broken. And we talked a lot about how the only way that we could be a healthy family or even a whole family was to have this separation. Like, this is the only way that was going to work. And it just looks different. And don't worry, eventually a bunch of your friends are going to have parents who are divorced. Yeah.
Well, the thing is that it's true, but it's a hard truth, right?
Yeah.
When I got divorced, when I made that decision, I felt like I was breaking my family.
Yeah.
Right? I felt so much guilt, and I felt so much pain, and I felt like, what was I doing to my children?
Yeah.
And yet I knew that I had to go. I knew that it couldn't continue as it was.
So there was a quote that my mom shared with me, I guess when I was in the process of leaving or navigating that experience before I had left. And it was, I believe the woman, her name is Melissa, and I don't know her last name, but she wrote all the Whole30 cookbooks and all of those things. That's, and now she's kind of an activist, and I don't know what I know what her Instagram handle is. But she said, in reference to her divorce, the only thing harder than leaving was staying.
Yeah.
And I know that that's what other people have said, but I just kept hearing that because it was like, this is too hard.
Yeah.
Like, this is too much. It is too hard, but it would have been harder to stay.
Yeah. Yeah. The author that I was looking for was Leonard Cohen. So I apologize. Apologize, Lenny. The song was Anthem. And the thing is, it can be too hard to stay.
Yeah.
And you're doing damage that you don't realize when you stay.
Yeah.
And waiting does different damage. Saying you're going to wait until the kids are grown up, that creates different issues. I won't say, but people make choices. So, and whatever choice you make is the choice for your family. So there is no assignment of blame. This is a no judgment space.
Yeah.
So we need to sort of unlearn, what society has told us is what, your job is, or your responsibility is, or your role is. And a lot of what those teachings were about subliminating our own selves to a whole that diminishes women.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to be the mom that I wanted to be if I stayed in the marriage. And I wouldn't, forgetting wanting to be, I wouldn't be the parent that they needed.
Yeah.
And if I stayed. And so it's interesting because I think I both stayed longer in the marriage because of my kids, but was able to leave also because of my kids.
Right.
Right. They gave me that, like, I need to be a parent to them. And I can look at the different effects that the divorce has on my, my three kids. My youngest was just over 3 when we separated. And I had a middle son who was 5. And, my oldest remembers us being married. He was 7, and he remembers us living together. He remembers us being married. He remembers doing things as a family. Like, he has memories. But he also remembers not great stuff.
Yeah.
And he also had a mom who, for a big chunk of his life, wasn't in therapy and was in a bad marriage, right? And then there's my 3-year-old who does not remember me living in the house that his dad still lives in, and doesn't have memories of us together as a family. But also his mom was in therapy from the time he was 1 year old. And he always had, from 3 on, a healthy, safe place to live where there was joy. And so, I don't know, like, I don't have memories of my parents ever being married. And so in a way, my 7-year-old has kind of a gift because there were some good things, but he also remembers a lot of the not great stuff. And he also had a mom that was really struggling. Whereas my youngest, and I know my poor middle child is just there being ignored, but
Poor middle child.
but my youngest had a much healthier environment, and you can see it. And yeah, they all have different personalities, but you can see it in how he reacts to things and processes things. And so, I don't think there is a wrong or a right answer, but it's sort of different things that your kids are going to have to carry with them.
Yeah. We're way over our commercial breakdown. So we're going to take a quick 30-second break now. But when we come back, we're going to talk about going boldly and how we move into that next space. So with that, we will see you back in 30 seconds. And we're back with Tovah Kopan of the Go Boldly initiative. So, Tovah, tell us about this initiative and how you started it, why you started it, and how people can get connected.
Well, it's a fun story because it started in the fabulous year of 2020, where everything went well. And at the beginning of the year, Mel Robbins had a best decade ever, maybe some sort of like free. I know, it's hilarious. It's hilarious. 2020, that was the kickoff to the best decade ever. But she had a like free multi-step course, mini course is the best way to describe it, I guess. And a number of people in a group that I was in was going to do it. And so we all decided to do it together. And I ended up partnering up with a woman named Riley Karsh. And we decided that we would be each other's like support and accountability partner. And I did not know Riley. We had been in some New Jersey lawyer moms groups together, both for activism and advocacy. And then we had planned to go see Alanis Morissette, which of course did not happen in 2020, with a bunch of people from New Jersey. And so when we were doing this accountability course, when you're never going to see somebody again, you never met them in real life. So you just share all your innermost secrets, right? Because you're like, I'm never going to see you. We don't know each other. And so I shared things about my marriage that had ended and my life and how I wanted to have a podcast and what my big goals were and all of these different things. And she shared with me a bunch of things. And then the pandemic happened. And around mid-April, maybe, I was out for a walk with my mask on, of course. And I get a text from her that was like, do you want to start a podcast together? And I said, yes. And then we backed it up and figured out what the podcast would be about. And initially, our thoughts were, let's have a podcast on how the pandemic is affecting women, because it's affecting women so disproportionately. I was at home with 3 kids trying to, I had a new job, and it was like an aggressive sales job. I was like, I'll take this on. This is great. And, 2020, best year. And I had, I wasn't sleeping because I was working all night. Like, I was staying up to work until 2 or 3 in the morning, and then getting up with my kids and trying to pretend to teach them school. And that second half of the school year, they weren't ready, obviously, for anything. And so the at-home learning was, come the fall of 2020, they were ready. But the spring of 2020, what the teachers did was amazing, but it was also not everything that they needed. So it was a mess. And so we decided we wanted to talk about this. We wanted to have a podcast where we talked about how women were affected by the pandemic and really dig into the research and how, and the more we started talking about it, the more we realized that the reason women were most affected, in a way, was because of the way we move about society and how we see ourselves and how society sees us. And that maybe this conversation needed to be a lot deeper. And maybe we needed to be talking about how we move in the world and how we see ourselves. And so we are both psychology majors in law school or in college, and then we both went to law school. So we love research and we love learning. And so we started doing some research.
In your free time, right? In your free time.
Yes, in our free time. We decided to launch
during COVID. Yeah,
during
right.
COVID. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so we decided to launch a podcast and dig deep. And like the first episode, beyond the episode that was just like, hi, this is who we are, was about listening to your inner voice. And that's kind of what we always keep coming back to, no matter how many times, like even today, the conversation about that first instinct to be competitive. Like, if I believed that was truly my inner voice talking to me rather than just a weird instinctual thing, that would be really upsetting. But I've learned what my inner voice sounds like, and I've learned to listen to it. And then as we were talking about the podcast, I had said, I would really like this to be part of a larger coaching, grow a community. And I don't want to just do a podcast. I want to do speaking. And Riley loves to write and I love to write. And we'd love, we want to write courses and books. And so fortunately, we were on the same page. There was a lot of learning that we had to do because we have very similar backgrounds, but we don't have very similar personalities. And so we had to learn how to communicate with each other and learn it while not meeting in real life. I actually just saw a photo pop up, and it was from, I think, November of 2020. And that was the first time we'd met. So we launched this whole thing and we worked on it over Zoom. And we really tried, especially at the beginning, to have all of our conversations over Zoom and not just on the phone, so that we could learn what each other talked about and just, but it was only, it's 2024, it's 4 years ago, which is insane. And, now I'm spending Thanksgiving with her next week. Our families are very close. But at the time it worked out very nicely because we were able to approach it as a business. And then friendship came on later. because, lawyers like contracts and stuff. So we were able to like kind of take care of all those things from the outset. But we really wanted to have both a podcast and just a whole community that is driven by helping women hear their own voice and figure out what they want to do. And also figure out, we often talk like it is never going to be a place where you're going to have a best year ever, or going out and being like, I'm going to go and be the best version of myself. I mean, hey, if that happens, that's great. But like, this idea that we should constantly be thriving. And I mean, sometimes we talk about that a lot. Like, what is there an in-between between surviving and thriving? Because, I don't want day to day to be a survival of the fittest. But also like thriving seems really aspirational some days. Like I'm tired and I have lots of jobs and lots of kids. And, so we wanted to be able to have these conversations. And we also felt like in a lot of what we read, we are both big Brene Brown fans. So not in her writing, but in a lot of writing, there isn't research. There isn't information behind it. In a lot of these things that we talk about now, there's a lot of science behind it. There's science behind the benefit of gratitude. There's science behind working and trying new things, right? It makes you more elastic almost, so that you can be able to handle failure when it happens. And learning to be flexible. I was just talking to my son about this last night. Sort of, we have all gotten into Connections in my house, the New York Times game. And we were talking about how much we love the fact that it makes our brain work differently. Like something could be like these 4 things are all the same, but maybe something else is like these 4 things have a prefix word that connects them. And, there's science behind that's really good for you. And so, yeah, we just kept going, and we try things and we figure out if we like them, and we do seasons within our podcast so that there's a little bit of a focus. So right now, this season is a hard one, but it's on unbecoming, and that process of whether it's unlearning or letting go of those things that we've been carrying with us, maybe the things that are telling us, we should have been more successful, or we should have been able to make our marriage work. I think a lot of people carry a lot of guilt that is just not fair that we put on ourselves. And, there's always this comparison of, well, people used to not get married, you cannot get divorced. And it's like, yes, well, women also used to not be able to have their own bank account. So I'm not saying that everyone in the 50s stayed married because they couldn't have their own bank account, but certainly some did. So I think that we enjoy this process. We do it, I think, selfishly because we love it. But we also we love working with people, either individually or groups. I think groups is one thing we've learned that we really love. Whether it's our women's circle or whether it's doing a presentation to a group, because then we can learn from a lot of people. And then once again, it goes back to the thing we talked about at the very beginning. We can be standing in front of a group of people and people can be nodding and like, oh yeah, okay. But then when we open up to the audience and maybe somebody in the group says something and uses an example, and you can see someone else in the group light up because it's like, that's what they needed to hear. That person needed to be the messenger for them. And so, that's one of the reasons we really love to present to groups.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, that's a journey, and that's not the journey that you expected when you got married, right? We had one journey in mind, and that's not the journey that life happened to take. And so you created your own journey that you didn't expect because you liked Mel Robbins right? And you just happen to like tune in to the Mel Robbins podcast, which you didn't necessarily have to tune into that. You could have been listening to Brene Brown,
Right.
right? But instead you were listening to Mel Robbins at that point. And so there's a couple of things. I mean, we're at 35 minutes, so we don't have that much more time, but tell us about your women's circle.
Yeah. So we both participated in a women's circle that we really loved. And so we decided when we no longer participated in it, we decided we missed it. And I was like, wait, we could do one. Like, why not? And so our women's circle, we meet once a week. There's people from all over the country who kind of come and go within the group. And, we have some structure to it, right? Because we try to bring something to it from a coaching perspective. And oftentimes we'll be talking about the most recent podcast. Not that you have to listen to the podcast, but that just gives us sort of a perspective. But it is a wonderful place. It is something that I look forward to throughout the week. And ironically, there was a woman yesterday who texted me and she's like, wait, are we starting right now? And I said, no, it's on Wednesday, right? And she's like, it's not Wednesday. She was so excited. She was like, I thought we were starting. And I was like, no, it's tomorrow. She's like, I just really needed to be in the group. But, we really try to provide each other with support. And what I have learned is, it is great to have friends who are supporting you. And it is great to have family who are supporting you. There is something special about having people that you don't really know. And because, you're not always on the same journey as the friends that you've had for a long time. And you can be doing something differently. And when I first started reading personal development books, like a lot of my friends don't read them. And so that's fine. But it would have been weird if I would have been like, hey, so, there's this Eat That Frog book, or there's this you're kind of isolated. And so what the women's circle does is it allows you to be with a group of people that don't know you, right? And so maybe they don't know, or they don't know you right away. Maybe they don't know your marriage. And right now, all of your friends are tied up in dealing with that fallout. And it's a lot, and that's hard as a friend to support somebody through. And so it's just this really wonderful place each week to come. We do it on Zoom, and just to get support, to show support, to learn. Sometimes we'll talk about, like I said, what we've been working on or what we've been talking about. But a lot of times by the end, it's just us sharing what we're going through. And we end every week with our struggles and our celebrations. And sometimes it's really hard to find those celebrations, but some week it's hard to find the struggles. And honestly, often it's the same thing, right? Like I've been dealing through this thing and it's been really hard, but I'm really proud with how I've been dealing with it. Yeah. Like it could be the same thing. So we love it. And we are always looking for more folks to join us.
That's wonderful. So what a great invitation and opportunity for you, for my listeners. And so how can my listeners find you, join the circle? Tell us more.
Right. So you can always follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and we're on LinkedIn. So we're Go Boldly Together is our Instagram and Facebook. We are no longer on Twitter. So we didn't do anything there anyway, but we're on Instagram. That's where we're most active. But you can also just go to our website, goboldlyinitiative.com, and hopefully it's easy to navigate. That's our goal. And you can find all of our courses that we have and also the circle. And you go there and you sign up, and then you'll get invited, get our Zoom, and get all the information.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much for being here. And to my audience, you can always find me at lzlcoaching.com. You can reach me, Lisa, at lzlcoaching.com. And you can book a free 30-minute consult, and we can talk. And we can work together. And you can always find me online at WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network Radio, Podcasts, and TV. And you can find me Dishing on Divorce, Next Chapter with Lisa Lisser, on wherever you get your streaming podcasts, and we're there. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on Tuesday with our Tuesday version of Dishing on Divorce. Thank you and have a great rest of your week.